Hey there, it's been quite a heavy week and there's more to come, but I thought it might be interesting to sort of halfway through do a little discussion. This channel is committed to providing a higher level of discussion than is typically provided in Washington, D.C. or in mass media outlets. On the topic of Saudi Arabia, that's not very hard to do. So, today, I'd like to present a discussion with my two absolutely exhausted roommates who are just back from Coachella.
Hello.
What's up?
How was Coachella for you, Travis?
I don't even know where to start. Amazing, Ray. I didn't expect less, but it was everything I needed.
Everybody jump!
Yeah, our selfie game is strong right now.
Yeah.
Still in the flow.
Well, I'm glad you guys are back. And today, I think we'll be discussing Saudi Arabia, the sort of related issues that I've brought up with the video. And what do you guys think of the videos?
Hey, thanks, Rob. Honor for you to bring us on here. Appreciate being on. I've watched a few of your videos. I follow pretty closely, and I think it's great stuff. Really excited about this series on Saudi Arabia. Opened my eyes.
Well, it's not just on Saudi Arabia. We're trying to cover more widely, but we're definitely starting out with Saudi Arabia because I think the issues surrounding that country are pretty
Right.
serious.
No, you raise a great point. You had one of your videos just 1 or 2 days ago was about Saudi Arabia specifically, and there were just things in there that opened my eyes for sure that I hadn't expected. So anyway, appreciate their hard work on that.
I definitely didn't watch all the videos like Travis. Sorry. But I did watch one video just now before we did this.
It's a
very
very
informative video. Mm-hmm. However, it's something I will say just because to play devil's advocate, I have had an issue in the past and still do kind of with Rob's obsession with Saudi Arabia. Now, it may be justified. However, he definitely has a hard-on for Saudi Arabia, and I don't know that the whole region's all their problems come down to Saudi Arabia.
So, Rob, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, why the hard on?
Let's turn the questions to you.
I think that's a very good point, and it's something that I struggle with a bit because I don't want to come across as being against Saudi Arabia or against Saudi Arabians. I think there's two parts to sort of what you're saying. Like A, like why the obsession, and B, do I hate Saudi Arabia? As far as A, why the obsession, it's people don't realize what an incredible impact this country has had. Across the Muslim world, folks have been at a lower level of development due to just the way that industrialization happened, imperialism, colonialism, all of that. And what happened was Saudi Arabia very quickly jumped from a low level of development to a much higher level of development, and they were dramatically ahead of the rest of the Muslim world. So they had this sort of first mover advantage that allowed them to shape the way that the religion was practiced, not just in their own country, which I'm completely for, and I'm not someone who wants to go in and control what people believe in their own country. But what bothers me, and the influence that isn't appreciated enough, is the incredible influence they've had on the practice of Islam of every country, even in this country.
It's a great point, Rob, and I want to thank you for making that point because from a bottom-up angle, I have a lot of friends who, from school, from work, from travel, who are from Saudi Arabia. And just like when somebody critiques U.S. and our system and our foreign policy, they're not critiquing the people necessarily, the individuals. I think that's an important point about Saudi Arabia is that there are an incredible number of industrious people who are doing great things, and it's certainly not a look specifically at a nation of people. It's a look at a system that's grown from these historical forces.
I'm not as optimistic on Saudi Arabia as you're sort of presenting there. I think that they've been kind of I think that the greatest victims of Saudi Arabia's sort of public profile, approach towards religion, and just sort of development model are the Saudi Arabians, because I think that they've missed out on a lot of opportunities that sort of develop normally in a development process, if that makes sense, because they've been given so much. It's difficult to develop a lot of the skills that are necessary for a modern economy. So while of course there are brilliant industrious individuals in Saudi Arabia, I think that the societal forces in the country are a bit negative. And I think that as the oil price continues to fall, we're going to see a lot of fallout from that. And I think individual Saudi Arabians are going to suffer. Like, I think there's probably going to be a change of model.
I completely agree. But I think it's worth emphasizing when some people generalize Islam or generalize Muslims, they lose the nuances that make the fact important.
Exactly.
And none of us here are just here to say that all Saudi Arabians are bad, and that's why.
No, and I definitely.
I think that's just worth saying.
I want to distance myself from that. I think there's I mean, to an extent, as I'll get to later in the week, I think that Saudi Arabia, by being put in this position, because it's not like this is what I'm talking about, the sort of link between ideology and money and whatnot, was some sinister Saudi plan. I mean, these were sort of the facts on the ground in a predominantly tribal society, and people in the West, initially the British Empire and then the United States, made the choice to put them in this position.
Well, T, you both mentioned this already once each, and I don't know that anyone made a choice. I think once they found out they were sitting on the most important resource in the modernized world, which was oil, that all of a sudden, they're going to prop them up and instill governments that are friendly and let them get away with whatever they want. Because this isn't just an American problem. It's not a Middle Eastern problem. The entire world is addicted to oil.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
There's several entities that are going to be okay with putting them on UN's Council for Women's Rights, even though they oppress women, because this is where you get their dope. They get their dope, their oil, from them. So at the end of the day, they're going to let them run roughshod and spread whatever fundamentalist, crazy religious stuff they want to do, have us attack their enemies like Iraq and Iran, for them to keep them oil fields secure and safe. We've been in 2 wars, both started by people from the Bush family, mind you. And
Ray versus the Republican Party.
No. It's a fact.
Through a video without
it's a fact.
Can't go through a video without it.
However, it's all about oil, in my opinion. This is the main issue that we are not willing to discuss. I mean, your video goes into great detail to talk about their influence and what we've done as a result of their influence. And you said even the British had their backs, and they funded and helped us in Afghanistan, or helped the Afghanis and when they fought the Russians. At the end of the day, they've been able to do all this and been propped up like this and given free reign, and no one supposedly investigated the 15 of the 19 people that came from Saudi Arabia that attacked us on 9/11, because they control all the oil.
See, I think that there were periods of time when that was true, and
what period wasn't it true?
Well, it's now, and it's a very very new thing. Since 2014, obviously due to a bunch of trends that had existed before, in 2014, it was when the market sort of woke up to the fact that Saudi Arabia and OPEC more generally does not have the pricing power that it used to. Like, if Saudi Arabia disappeared tomorrow, then yes, we'd all be screwed. You know, oil would be back up at $200 or something like that. But Saudi Arabia can't just disappear tomorrow. Whereas it used to be that Saudi Arabia could, like, fiddle with things by a percentage point or two and make the oil price do whatever they wanted. That's over.
Wow, I think that's very premature. Very premature to say that their influence with their vast reserves of oil their influence is over.
No, I'm not saying they're in. Like I said, if they just cut the taps, then yes, it would be a disaster.
Well, they can do more than cut the taps. I mean, they can restrict the flow. They can stop trading with certain nations. They can do a lot of things that they want. At the end of the day, though, okay, you're talking about all this stuff from 2000, 2001. You're talking about wars that led up to now. We're not talking about 2014 beyond. So regardless, it's still all of our history, their influence over that whole region. How does it not come down to the fact they control this most precious resource? And
of course, I'm not disputing
if we wanted to put them not necessarily back in their place or take away their influence, then we need to stop relying on finite fossil fuels, which potentially is also a part of this factor. You're saying oil's coming down. Well, renewables are going up, biomasses are going up. All these different countries are leading the way in Europe and across the Western world with doing more with renewable energy and sustainable energy sources. But at the end of the day, we are still full on hooked on oil.
There's no
and that's not going to change in our lifetime.
So Ray, let me ask you this real quick. So I remember as 9/11 happened and there was confusion in the U.S., we get attacked by terrorists for the first time, and what's going on? And
well, it wasn't the first time.
Well, yeah, but it was the
most
large,
successful. Yeah,
exactly.
Biggest thing since Pearl Harbor.
Sure, exactly. And we were looking for the people who did this, and we wanted to make it right, and we found them, and they were the Taliban, and none of us knew who the Taliban were, but let's go get them. And then Iraq is suddenly involved, and we're like, all right, Iraq, but why Iraq?
Years later, right? 2001, Afghanistan, 2003, Iraq.
Right. And then the post 9/11 Commission report came out, and all these other investigations, and so suddenly the narrative shifts a bit, and it leaves it a bit hollow. So Ray, with that context of Saudi funding the 9/11 to the extent that they have, and the spread of radical Wahhabism, and supplying these terrorists who are the ones that actually executed the attacks, how does that make you feel about what the government and the military were doing and what was being told and sold to the public?
Well, we've been lied to from day one when it comes to Iraq. Even the first war, the Bush Sr. went in because they said Saddam was invading this country.
Yeah, well, that did happen.
Of course, but there's a lot of dictators and a lot of people invade a lot of countries. We don't just go to war with all of them. We don't go and start dropping hella bombs bombs over Baghdad, son. We don't do that just because somebody invades another sovereign nation. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of made-up lines on the map, and people cross them all the time and kill others, and we don't invade. At the end of the day, we invade it because we have to have a stable democracy there in order to access to oil.
The initial, not invasion, but Gulf War I is something that I'm very conflicted about because it's interesting, and you can actually see that action by George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, who I generally respect. I think that he managed the end of the Cold War very well. But that action, I mean, all of this sort of disaster in the Middle East can be traced back to that initial decision. Yes, people have made decisions since that have made things worse, but it's Osama bin Laden's main.
I just don't think that's the big issue people have. Okay, like Kuwait's a sovereign nation. Yeah. They were being invaded. You can argue that both sides, but generally you're defending a sovereign nation. But let's move forward now. 9/11 happens, and then we're going into Iraq. And we never hear anything about Saudi Arabia. They're not listed in the Axis of Evil speech. They're not, where are they? And as we're finding out these details, in the back of my mind somewhere, I'm like, why Saudi Arabia? Are they like Jordan? Are they just an ally that keeps quiet that we don't mess with? What's going on? And I'll be honest, now that I'm going through some of your essay, and now that I'm going through some of these videos and doing some research on my own, there's a big gaping hole there.
Absolutely.
It says, wait, why didn't we connect the line through what actually happened?
Because it wasn't in our best interest.
And there's a bunch of there's a couple in particular, like simple stories that were told that aren't really true. In 2004 and 2005, Al-Qaeda did attack Saudi Arabia. And after that happened, I mean, there were mass terror events. It was a very rough thing. And after that happened, Saudi Arabia did take some steps towards arresting actual Al-Qaeda members, cleansing the religious hierarchy a bit of those that would actively celebrate things like 9/11 and push that forward. And it did change the country. It was a change, but it was, I would argue, a cosmetic change.
Because this happened before we went to war based on the weapons of mass destruction, or when
the Al-Qaeda is 0405, Iraq is 2003. But Al-Qaeda attacking Saudi Arabia. So this is a specific thing. And Rudy Giuliani in particular loves to point to this attack that Al-Qaeda made on Saudi Arabia, and likes to say that, no, Saudi Arabia is different now because they see, what matters and they see what's serious. And linked to that is we're going after the funders of terror. We're gonna shut down these networks, which even at the time people acknowledged publicly that a lot of the funding for I want to be careful about using terms like the vast majority, but I think it was the vast majority of the funding for Al-Qaeda came from Saudi Arabia. Not from the Saudi Arabian government necessarily, though some did, but from private sources in Saudi Arabia. So we've talked about how, and the sort of standard story from Washington, D.C. is we've shut down these networks of terrorist funding. But
you can't do that without going into Saudi Arabia and then getting these prominent individuals?
That's what's frustrating, and I think that's something that we should look at more seriously going forward, is that we don't have to get individuals. The United States controls finance worldwide to a degree that is not appreciated, and they have the tools. They've developed the tools to sort of single out certain charities because it's sort of Islamic certain kinds of Islamic charities
We can,
that
freeze
were
your,
funneling.
we can freeze your assets.
Exactly. We can do all this sorts of thing. And the story is that this happened, but it didn't, because the Bush administration, the Obama administration to a lesser extent, and certainly the Trump administration, it's one of their rallying cries, have decided that what's more important is worrying about Iran. And when we took down Iraq, that made Iran much more powerful in Iraq. So, sort of Sunni radical networks, the guys that were killing our guys in Iraq, and there's actually some of the same personnel from Iraqi insurgents to the Sunni war now. Those guys became valuable to us again. So there have been some small, like, oh, we're shutting down this network, we're shutting down that network. But radical Sunni militants are still a tool of U.S. policy in the Middle East. So we're actually, and I would argue, doing things that are not worth doing, like destabilizing Syria, fighting in Yemen, which is something that merits its own series down the line.
So you mentioned the leverage that the U.S. has, but then Saudi Arabia has some leverage too.
Absolutely.
And one of those levers is its control of at least a lot of the Sunni practice across the Middle East by virtue of their funding
Yes.
of many different flavors of it, by virtue of Mecca and Medina both being located within its own borders. Iran would not agree with me that Saudi controls Islam, and that's fair.
Oh, I wouldn't agree with that statement.
Right.
But
They've got leverage.
they have incredible leverage that is not appreciated.
It's financial leverage.
It's
what you're saying.
And religious and influence, other sorts of power leverage.
Sure, but if you take the funding away from this religion, and like if the Romans didn't have a bunch of money backing them, they wouldn't be as big as the Roman Catholic Church is.
Yes.
So if the Sunnis didn't have this funding coming from oil-rich families or prominent families in Saudi Arabia, with this, you're saying the radicalization of Islam wouldn't have perpetuated the way that it did.
Absolutely. What's extraordinary is, and if you look at every, not every single, but a extraordinarily high number of high-profile terrorist events, there is a Saudi connection. The founder of Boko Haram, I think they're on their third or fourth leader at this point, but Boko Haram, really nasty radical militants in northern Nigeria, right? Their founder spent serious time in Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure if it was that guy who got a degree in Saudi Arabia.
So you're saying we are protecting the one country that is not only spreading the fundamental radical version of Islam, but also financing terrorism to a great degree.
Absolutely.
And we are protecting, ignoring, and pretty much letting them run roughshod over the area because
they're useful.